Get your win at wallacewins.com.
Pratik, welcome.
Thank you, Brad. Thanks for having me, man.
Long time coming.
Long time coming. I know.
You're a tough man to get a hold of.
No, I'm not. I just had to drive out here. That's all. That's on me. Well, I appreciate you inviting me and having me on.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. And we've been talking about having you on the podcast for some time. So it's nice to finally make it happen. Pratik is a practicing attorney and also CEO of a startup company that we'll get into and talk about. I guess maybe we can't even classify it as a startup anymore. It's pretty mainstream in the legal industry, and I want to hear a little bit about that.
Thank you.
But first, like we always do, we're going to start off our podcast today with a segment that everybody knows and loves called Rapid Fire.
All right.
All right, you've probably seen how this works.
I have.
I'm going to throw out a bunch of topics, and you're going to give me your most rapid response, and we're going to get it going. You ready?
Just don't get me canceled, man.
All right. We'll try not to. Coolest place you've ever been?
I don't travel a lot, but I got to say, like, my kids' baseball games, man.
All right.
I love watching them play.
There you go. Best sport to watch?
On TV, it's got to be football. In person, actually, I went to a few hockey games, and that was a lot of fun to watch. But on TV, it's got to be football.
Yeah, hockey's definitely different in person. Movie you've seen more than any other?
Boiler Room. Probably seen that movie 24 times.
Your favorite time of day?
The morning. I love to get up in the morning, grab myself a cup of coffee. I usually try to read a chapter in a book or something before I get my day started, and then just get cranking.
First band you saw live?
I'm not a big band guy, but my first concert was Jay-Z.
Best city you've ever lived in?
San Diego, man. I love it down there.
Shout out to all our San Diego peeps. Best compliment you've ever received?
Probably just, you know what? I know the best compliment I ever received is I had a buddy who referred me a case, and a year after when it's settled, and I told him, hey, that case you referred me settled. I got a referral check coming your way. And he's like, oh, I had forgot about it. He's like, with you, I don't even track. And to me, that's a compliment because he knows I'm going to do what I say.
Biggest pet peeve?
Lack of integrity. It's just when people don't do what they say, that drives me nuts.
Most famous person you've ever met?
Shaq. That one's easy.
Cool.
Yeah.
Shout out to the big fella.
Yeah.
We'd love to have you on the podcast sometime.
I'll let him know.
Mr. O'Neill. Yeah.
I'll tell him.
Favorite sports team?
The Lakers.
There we go.
Born and raised Laker fan, baby.
There we go. What music are you listening to right now?
I'm a big hip hop head, and so I've been listening to a lot of J. Cole, but I'm waiting for some new stuff to drop, but I like to listen to some of his old stuff.
Window or aisle seat?
Aisle. All day aisle. It's easy to get up and get out. I don't got to worry about anybody else and stepping over them, and I don't have to make this decision of do I give them, the front or the back as I walk over them. I'm just right on the aisle.
And that has been Rapid Fire.
Perfect.
Awesome. All right, well, let's talk about some of the legal stuff that we'd love to get into a little bit with you today. I want you to kind of walk us through your journey. Obviously you're a practicing attorney. You've been practicing law for
just a little over 10, like 11 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we also know that you're CEO of Esquire Tek, which is a legal startup and a platform to help with automating discovery.
Yeah.
So talk about your journey in terms of how you got into the practice, and then how what drove you to kind of pivot and start this company, and how that's been for you so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give the short version, not to bore your audience, but graduated, obviously, started at the DA's office, did that for a year, which was awesome. Got to try some cases, which I love doing. But I always had the bug to start my own firm. So I left, started my own. I ran my own just by myself for a couple of years. I partnered up with my buddy Arthur, who was a great business partner for the last seven or so years. We had our business together. And in that time, we're always talking to our staff. We're always asking them, how can we help you guys do your job better? Here's what our goals are as a company. What's slowing us down? And the consistent response I always got from them was just written discovery. It's just tedious and it's mind-numbing, and it just takes too much time. It slows us down. And then it slows the cases down. You can't get to the next step. So we tried to find all these solutions like outsourcing or, hiring maybe a high school student or things like that to kind of help with the manual parts, and it never really worked out. I couldn't believe that there wasn't something like, why can't a computer do this? A computer should be able to do this. And then I got very blessed in finding my co-founder, Dr. Slim Sweesey, who has developed tons of software programs before, kind of explained to him the concept. We met for a lot of times discussing the vision of it. And he's like, yeah, I can build that. And then a year later, it was born. And I was like, yeah, this is exactly what we need. And so obviously the first test firm was my own firm for a while.
And what year was that?
We launched publicly December 2020. Internally, we probably started using it in the middle of 2020. The pandemic obviously brought a lot of negative things, but the one positive thing was it gave a lot of time. When litigation got put on hold, there was a lot more time to work on stuff like this.
Yeah, the great pause, right?
The great pause, exactly. We launched December 2020, and it's been very positive. A lot of people have really loved it and enjoyed it, and we've gotten a lot of firms using it. It's been fun to see. It's been fun to see that this problem that existed is a problem that a lot of people had. Because at first I'm like, is it just me? Are we just an inefficient firm? Does everybody else have this figured out? And the answer was no.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too, you talk about it like when you're running your own practice and you're talking to your staff and you're assessing what the pain points are and where the inefficiencies are, you're really looking at it like in a fishbowl from the perspective of how it's impacting your own business, your own ecosystem. But then when you create a company like this and then you start to market it and talk to other firms, it kind of opens your eyes to say, wait, this wasn't something that was just singular to my practice.
Yeah.
This is a problem, or this is a pain point, or kind of a friction point that firms are having across the board. So how did that influence sort of the development of the company and how much time you put into it once you saw that others were having the same issues?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I think you're 100% right. Once you start talking to so many firms and firms are being open about what they're dealing with, you start to see, wow, there's so much more that I didn't even notice. And what the program looked like when we launched it versus what it looks like today versus with all the new features and everything, it's night and day, and it's because of user feedback. Because we talk to the paralegals, we talk to the attorneys, and we say, hey, what else would you guys like to see in this? How else can we provide you value? And I say, well, it'd be cool if we could automatically create the proof of service. We're like, yeah, we could do that. So we start developing that, and they're like, hey, what if we could do this? We're like, yeah, we could do that.
Right.
We start, and it's really cool to see. On one hand, it's like, man, we really are all inefficient as a firm and as businesses, and there's so much room for improvement. And then on the other hand, it's so cool to see people tell you, hey, here's what I need to do my job better. And you kind of get impressed at how many paralegals and legal assistants and staff members care so much about their job and their clients. And they go, for us to better serve the company and our client, here's what would help us.
Right.
And you love to see that there are a lot of people that care about being good at their jobs.
Talk about the interesting dynamic that you just explained, which is, as you're interfacing with clients and you're getting the feedback of, hey, it'd be great if it could do this. It'd be great if it could do that. The double value you get from developing your product even more to serve existing clients, but then once it's developed, being able to turn around and market it to future customers to say, now we have this and we have that and we have that. So it's beneficial to both sides to continue to update and build the platform. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's 100% correct. And I think there's folks that are early adopters in whatever technology that's out there. The thing that I love about being a tech company is that we can pretty quickly adopt and make changes. Now, we have to balance the feedback that we get from people with the vision that we have for the company and make sure it kind of all fits in. And then the other thing is, as the company grows and you have more and more users on the platform, you can't make as many dramatic changes because people will freak out. But that's exactly right. I think the benefit of being an early adopter to tech is that you get to go in there and you get to have a voice on how this thing should be developed. The benefit of being a late adopter is you get a fully developed program, right? And so you try to balance that, and you want to reward the people that came in early. So, people that came in early that have grandfather pricing, they get that benefit. They helped us, they trusted us early, they took a chance on us. They get that benefit. The benefit that somebody comes in later is they get a fully fledged out product. And so, that's the balance we try to strike with it.
Very cool. Let's talk about the platform itself. Can you speak to how Esquire Tek has been impacted, if at all, by the integration of AI technology in the practice and how it works within the platform that you guys offer?
Yeah, great question. So I think with AI, we need to kind of create a split we have to have a clarification on the split here of AI. There's AI that's been around for a while, and then there's generative AI, which is the new stuff, right? The Chat GPT that actually kind of generates an outputted document or an image, or actually takes the information it has, not just providing an analysis, but providing a generated document. So we've been using a form of AI in Esquire Tek since we launched. That's part of what it's built on. It's using technology called NLP, which is natural language processing, where a computer can read documents that are in regular English and kind of make an analysis. And that's kind of what we use to read discovery and kind of create the platform for the rest of it. I think the benefit that's happened is the ideas that come out of with this new technology of what we can develop over the next year or 2 years is very exciting, of what we can do when we read these documents, what suggestions we can make to lawyers, what kind of corrections and edits we can offer and say, hey, look, based on our analysis, here's what we see, and allow the attorney to look at those suggestions. Now, there's always the balance of making sure you don't want to be doing the legal work for the attorney. The attorneys have ethical obligations they have to make sure that they at the end of the day are signing off on their own work product. But the other, I think, biggest benefit from a market perspective is that firms have become a lot more open to technology. Right. When ChatGPT and the talk of AI became out there and really kind of in the public domain, a lot of firms that were anti-technology are now like, hey, maybe we should start looking into this.
Right.
So I think that's helped. On just from a 20,000 foot perspective, I think I think there's a lot of companies out there claiming victory with AI and saying, oh, we got AI, it's going to do this. And then when you actually go and see it, it's not very strong. So I think people should kind of temper their expectations of what's currently out there,
right?
But be excited about what's going to be out there 5 to 10 years from now.
Yeah, and it's interesting because to your point, a lot of people talk about AI as just kind of this, vague, like sort of all-encompassing topic when there's really a lot of different elements to AI. You have, to your point, the, document, the recognition AI, where it can, do a lot of things. It's been around for a while. It can read documents. It can synthesize information, but it's not really generating like work product in terms of the problems that you run into with the Chat GPT story of the lawyer filing a brief in New York and not fact checking or site checking,
which is insane.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you have also the other issue in the legal space, I think, of is it a closed AI or is it an open AI? Mm-hmm. Because in an open AI setting like ChatGPT, it's really just scrubbing the web. Mm-hmm. And then you have issues with, confidentiality and, having client confidential, sensitive information being accessible to which you want to avoid. Yeah. And then you have the closed AI universe where, maybe it's modeling, sample documents or things like that within a structure. Can you speak to kind of what your process is with Esquire Tek of how you've embraced some of the AI, but maybe stayed away from some of the AI that might, have some ethical issues? Yeah.
I mean, I think that the AI itself has certain limitations. I think what everybody is excited about and should be excited about is the potential. It's not there yet. I think a lot of times what people want is push a button and it does it, and maybe we'll eventually get there. But one, I think people should identify a problem in their office that they want to solve and then find a technology that fits that problem. But to address your point on making sure we're in line with the ethical considerations, that obviously is a serious concern when we're dealing with sensitive client files, lawyers that are dealing with medical records that have private information in there, including social security numbers and medical record numbers, et cetera, et cetera. We have a lot of that stuff in there. So we are HIPAA compliant. We get audited every 3 months when it comes to making sure that all of our compliance is in line. It's a third-party company that audits us and makes sure that we're in line. On top of that, right now, we have one section when it comes to medical record summarization that is using ChatGPT as an engine. But what we do before we submit the data back to ChatGPT, we anonymize it. So when the data comes into us, we anonymize it, we use the engine, we come back, we bring the information back, and then present it to the client. So we do that kind of work for you, so you don't have to go through and take out all this information and be careful.
Interesting.
And then, of course, what it does is it provides you kind of a level of protection in the sense of saying, hey, I'm using Esquire Tek. They're making all these promises to me. If they screw up, I have recourse.
Right. Now, what is the main area of the discovery process that Esquire Tek serves as a solution for?
Yeah, great question. So really 3 main parts. First, for most states that use pleading paper, where you've got the numbers down the side and somebody on your staff is copying and pasting to create that Word document that can take 45 minutes a page or 45 minutes per document. We automate that and it's done in 60 to 70 seconds. You upload the document, questions are extracted, put onto a Word document just the way you like it. That part's done. Second is client communication, where right now somebody on your team is calling a client, getting answers from them, sitting on the phone with them for 2 hours, 3 hours, asking them where they went to high school.
Right.
That's a nightmare. You can't be spending 2-3 hours of business hours doing that. So all the questions we extracted, you can send the client a text message link or an email link so they can kind of answer on their own time. And what's funny is our clients are law firms, and the clients of those law firms love this because what happens is they can do it at night when they're watching Netflix.
Yeah, they also don't want to spend 2 hours on the phone during a business day when they're working.
Exactly. Yeah. That's, we have to meet our clients where they're at. And one of the examples I tell people is like, when you go home at night from your law firm and you're trying to set a dinner with your friends, you don't email them.
Right.
You don't call them. You shoot them a quick text. The way we set up this appointment was text.
Yeah.
That's how everybody does business these days. But law firms feel like, no, it's unprofessional or it's something, but that's what clients want.
Yeah.
We're dealing with the public and that is what they want. And so we want to be kind of on that cutting edge. So that's number 2 is speeding up that client communication. And number 3 is taking all the data that's in a document. Like for example, when you upload a piece of discovery, it'll have opposing counsel's information there. We'll read that, we'll extract it, we'll put it right onto a proof of service. So it simplifies being able to create these documents like a proof of service or sending, once the answers are done, you can send them back to the client. They can quickly sign verifications and the verifications will be automatically generated. So this document generation part is also a big component. The little kind of extra I'll add to point 3.5, whatever you want to call it, 4, is what attorneys seem to love is our objections option.
I was just going to say.
Yeah, because I know you love that too, is instead of having to copy and paste objections into each of the answers, we just have an objections button that you click, a menu pops up, you just pick the objections you like, and it auto-populates the language for you. That is, of course, editable to your liking. And that just speeds up this process of instead of having to retype objections or copy and paste from another document. So it's taking the whole concept, as you can see, is taking, hey, what's this time-consuming part? How do we short circuit it?
Right.
And that's kind of the vision.
Without sacrificing any of the quality of the work
That's right.
And in many cases, I imagine it increases the work product quality.
That's right, because you can spend more time on crafting your answer or going through the documents. Instead of spending time copying and pasting or retyping objections or doing any of that stuff, you spend your time on the meat of the actual sandwich is in making sure your responses are accurate.
As you're saying all this, I'm just thinking, this might become a self-inflicted wound for me as my staff watches this podcast. They might be messaging me like, hey, why don't we have Esquire Tek?
Yeah, no,
so you might have just gotten a new customer just by coming on the show. But obviously, a lot of firms out there are using it.
Yeah.
Speak to what types of firms are currently customers and what kinds of firms that you're currently marketing to.
Yeah, great. So I would say the vast majority of our clients right now are personal injury firms. Okay. And then that's the vast majority, and then probably like 95% total is contingency fee firms. Those seem to be just a no-brainer for them because obviously if you're a contingency fee firm, you don't get paid till the case settles. The faster you can settle a case, the more cases you can handle in a year.
Time is money.
Time is money, right? So if we can take something that takes 10 hours, bring it down to 2 hours, it makes a lot of sense. Right?
And you're not suggesting that defense firms would be pushing back on your product because it would be minimizing their billable hours, right?
No. Of course, they're going to do what's best for the client, of course, right? But naturally, there's a tendency for defense firms to feel that pushback because it's a pushback on the business model, right? And I also think just me being in personal injury for 10 years, it's helped because I have friends.
Your network.
That's my network, right? But I think that any contingency fee firm that really sees it, it's just such a no-brainer because it's like a circle puzzle piece into the circle puzzle hole. It's like, oh, this makes perfect sense, you know?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Awesome. So now, what kind of percentage of your professional endeavors right now are dedicated to that versus your work at Panache, Boyle, and Ravipudi? And can you speak to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when Rahul and I discussed me joining the firm about 2 years ago, that was a big discussion point was, hey, you know, I am running this company. I have clients and customers that trust in us, and I can't just abandon. That goes back to the integrity thing. It's like, you can't just walk away. I have employees there. And he's like, hey, if you think you can do both, I'm fine with it. And so far, you know, they haven't fired me, so we're doing both. And, you know, it's a hard balance. What I'm very blessed with is my team at Esquire Tek. They're very, very good at their jobs. And I really try to hire the right people, pay them well, and let them kind of do their thing and talk to them about, hey, here's the vision, here are our goals, here's how we operate as a company, here are the principles that you have to follow. But in that framework on how you want to get the job done, you're the expert. I'm hiring you to do it. And so I rely on them a lot and trust them to do their job while I kind of do mine over at Panache.
Yeah. And talk about your role at Panache, Boyle, and Ravipudi right now, and how you're dealing with Esquire Tek, in fact, might help you in that role and support that role.
Yeah, absolutely. So a big part of my role at the firm is reviewing cases as they come in and working with firms that want to work with us and decide if it's a case that we want to take. So part of that is in going out to firms, meeting with them, letting them know who we are, what we do, what kind of value we can provide on cases, and seeing if they want to work with us. And obviously there's a benefit in saying that, hey, if I'm doing most of the events that I end up doing end up being like co-events because, you know, I'm marketing to law firms for Esquire Tek as well as talking to them about Panache, Boyle, Ravipudi. And so it kind of becomes a co-event. Every once in a while, there's events that are just solely Panache, Boyle, Ravipudi, and there are events that are solely Esquire Tek. And so I try to make sure I do things above board and the right way every time. An example being at the end of this month, I'm going to Legal Week in New York to speak on a panel about AI and tech. That's obviously fully a Esquire Tek thing.
Right.
So I request a week of vacation from the firm to let them know, hey, look, this week I'm going to be gone. But when I take a vacation, does that mean I'm just sitting back and actually vacation? No, It means I'm working on this other thing.
But even so, I mean, I would say through the relationships and through the networking that you do through Esquire Tek, that surely has to benefit the networking and the referral network that you're building at Panache, Boyle, and Ravipudi. You know, that's a firm that's, you know, very, very highly regarded, not only in Southern California, but around the country. So I could see where there's a lot of synergy there, just in terms of the networking and the opportunities and the people that you're meeting and how that fits in both with, you know, the Esquire Tek model, but also bringing new referral firms into the firm for you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The synergy is natural. It totally is natural. And, you know, I'm very blessed that they're supportive of the whole thing and they understand. You know, there are times where they've even been like, hey, you're not using Esquire Tek, talk to Pratik and like help me out, which is really cool. Most places don't do that. So they're super supportive. As long as you do your job, they'll be supportive, which I'm very grateful for. But yeah, no, that's absolutely right, is that most of the time you can do things, one leads to the other, one hand feeds the other, right? And both ways, vice versa, right? But there are times when they conflict and you just have to be careful and upfront and make sure that you do things right.
Let's take a pause on our discussion and move to our next segment, which is always a fan favorite called Underrated, Overrated. And this is where I give you a list of topics and you tell me whether they are underrated or overrated and a brief explanation why. All right, you ready?
Ready.
SoCal weather.
Underrated, man. Underrated. It's worth it. I mean, look at right now. There's a blizzard across the entire country. Texas is out of power, right? Look at the snow at the Bills-Steelers game that's going on. Chicago's getting really cold. Like, there's really nowhere you can be other than Florida and SoCal where we can enjoy the weather.
There we go. FaceTime calls.
Overrated. Don't FaceTime call me. Listen, text me. First of all, don't call me. Just text me. Who calls people anymore? FaceTime calls like half the time. Like, hold on, I got to go scramble to find a shirt or something like that.
I know.
No thanks.
I know. Ranch dressing.
I got to say overrated. I mean, I was a fat kid. All fat kids love ranch. And so, I'm not skinny now, but, I've had to stay away and cut out the ranch from my life. So I would say it's overrated on what it is.
All right. Shopping in person at the store.
I think it's underrated. I kind of like it. The downside of shopping online, and I've done it recently, is then now my Instagram feed is all ads from clothing.
Taylor Swift.
I think she's appropriately rated. I'm a Taylor Swift fan, man. We listen to it in the car. Even my kids like them. She's great. She's great at what she does. She's great at, she's a great businesswoman. And I think she gets a lot of credit for that. So I don't want to say she's underrated, but I don't think she's overrated. I think she deserves the credit she's getting.
See that? Pratik doing everything he can not to get canceled. See that? Postmates.
Oh, man, probably overrated. I thought it was, any of the delivery apps, great for a long time. You quickly gain weight in using them because whatever physical activity you had, and even going out and getting them is gone.
Right.
But I think more recently, the prices have gone out of control.
Yeah, they upcharge it pretty good.
Yeah, and it was fine for a while and it's all good. But even it's like the only person benefiting here is the app because the restaurants don't really like them. So if you've got like a favorite local restaurant, I feel bad sometimes ordering from Postmates or DoorDash because I know it costs the restaurant money too when you're trying to support a mom and pop business. So
yeah, I hear that. The snooze button.
Overrated. This is gonna sound weird, but I don't set an alarm.
Wow.
Because I wake up automatically after 6.5 hours of sleep.
Wow.
That's just natural. And so I just kind of wake up unless I know I've got, there's a court hearing right at 8 a.m. or something. I'm usually up by 6:30.
ChatGPT.
I think it's still underrated. I think they just launched the GPT store, which you can kind of go and create your own little GPT, which is pretty cool. People should check that out. And while it's not doing what people are wishing it would or what they feel that the media told them it would do, I think where it's going is going to be really incredible.
All right, Starbucks.
Overrated. The benefit of Starbucks, in my opinion, is how many locations they got and consistency, but they're the McDonald's of coffee. You know what you're getting, which is fine, but it's not, if you really want, great coffee or great experience, it's probably not the place to go. But I think those places sell consistency.
Side hustles.
That's a tough question for me. I was going to say overrated, but that's tough for me because I got two things going on. But I think that if I look back and kind of think about what I would tell my younger self in this kind of situation, I would tell them just double down on what's already working, because doing two things is very hard, especially when they're very different. But once you start it, you have no choice. You have to give your all to both.
Right.
But you got to switch hats, and that's more difficult. And you would probably end up getting the same rewards if you just doubled down on what you were doing. And
inflation.
That's a weird one to have overrated or underrated, man. I think it's so poorly rated that you have to say overrated because of where it's at, right?
All right. So back to our discussion. And I want to get back to, discussion about the benefits of Esquire Tek and the platform and what it can do for law firms. I'm sure in marketing the product to different law firms in the industry, I assume you come up against, situations where different firms are at different levels of automating their process. Maybe some firms are still with paper files.
Yeah.
Some firms have evolved and have their documents in the cloud. Some firms have been running the same way since 1975.
Yeah.
And the owners, who's running the firm, they're stuck in their ways. Some are, people who've just graduated law school and they're more open to embracing technology. So for the firms that aren't really embracing the technology as much as some of the others, how do they get started with embracing the technology? How does Esquire Tek fit into that equation? And what have you seen in terms of interfacing with a lot of different firms?
Yeah, great question. So I think that, just setting Esquire Tek aside for a second, there's a ton of legal tech platforms out there that all serve different purposes and can provide value in one way or another. And I think the first thing firms need to do is, one, make sure that they have a commitment or a desire to want to become more efficient. What happens a lot of times is firms don't really want to do it, but they just have heard about it, so they feel like they need to do it. If you're not into it and it's not for you, and you're happy, your firms, and you don't care if other firms are doing it, then just keep doing what you're doing. Like, that's okay, right? There's nothing wrong with that. It's the benefit of running your own business is you get to run it your way, right? But if you're looking at your firm and you're thinking, how do I make this better? How do I make it better for my staff? How do I become more efficient, make it better for my clients, make more money? All those things matter to you and you care about that. Then I think the answer to a lot of those questions is looking at what technology is out there. Then the hard part is, well, which technology do I look at?
And where do you start?
Right? I think that what firms should do is, depending on the size of their firm, is either assign one person or a group of people to start looking at different products. Because you may not even know what you need because you don't know what's out there. You don't know what's actually going to help. And if you've got maybe one staff member and one attorney so they can get their own perspectives and say, hey, both of you guys, once a month, I want you to review one legal tech company. You guys can pick any one, doesn't matter. Just review it, take a demo, take some notes, make some comments on it. And once a month, I want you to talk to me and present to me what you found and what's good and what you liked about it or what you didn't like about it. And I think even at what some might consider that a slow pace, it's better to get those looks and realize what's actually out there.
Right.
And as you start to do that, once you've done like 6 or 7 of these, you get kind of a master class on what's out there, what problems are they solving, and then it starts clicking for you within your firm of what's going to be a good fit.
Right.
But I think that firms need to just take it slow and not feel like, oh my God, I'm so behind. I got to jump into this thing right away and I got to adopt all this technology because somebody else said it was good. I think you got to figure out what's good for your firm. And the only way to do that is to have people that know the firm that can do that. So if you're really small, do it yourself. Once a month, take 30 minutes and review a tech. If you're kind of, smaller, mid-size, have one person do it. If you're bigger, you could have a committee. But I think you got to kind of start there.
Yeah. And obviously there's a lot of different types of legal tech out there. Is there a certain area where you would recommend for firms that are kind of starting from the ground up to start in a specific area? In other words, first take a look at case management software platforms and see about kind of organizing all your data in one place and where you want to kind of have your hub. Yeah. Or would you recommend going the route of looking at different legal tech options, which are more like kind of the bolt-on, like an Esquire Tek or something that helps you write demand letters or something that helps you review medical records or things like that? How would you recommend going about it?
I think that, case management systems are probably the best place to start to manage all your files. But I think it also depends on your size. If you're a smaller firm, you're running, 20, 50, maybe even 70 cases, 100 cases, Dropbox, things like that are probably sufficient if you're a 1 or 2 person firm. Mm-hmm. I think a big advantage that case management systems give you from a firm management perspective is all the data, being able to see a snapshot of your business, being able to project what income's coming in so you can decide who you want to hire or how much you want to spend on marketing. Things like that can help.
Right.
I think absolutely everybody should take a look at the case management systems out there to see if it makes sense for you. But what I think does happen a lot in our industry is we see people that say, I use this and it's amazing. And then people go, oh my God, I have to use that too. And I mean, that's true for Esquire Tek. But for these other companies, it may not necessarily be true because it may not necessarily be a fit for your firm. Even from an Esquire Tek perspective, obviously we automate written discovery. We help with written discovery. So if you don't do litigation, there's no point in you looking at Esquire Tek.
Right.
You don't have any written discovery. So no matter how many people tell you it's great, it's not a fit for you.
Right.
And I think the same is true for any of the technology that's out there. But yes, I agree. I think case management systems are the best place to start to give you a sense of how you should be organizing your files and what data points you can be tracking. Just from a business owner perspective, being able to pull a report and says, how many cases did we settle last year? How many signups did we do? What was our income per case? Things like that give you such a great insight into your firm as a business that'll help you get to where you want to get to.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, for anyone that's implemented a case management software and consolidated their data like that, I think that's the big game changer, right? I think Mike Morse, who wrote Fireproof, talks about, you want your scoreboard, your law firm scoreboard. But to have, handy, how many cases did we settle per month and what was the average value and, what was the average, referral fees that were paid and who are the main referral sources and what are the, case types that net the most money and, what's the cost per acquisition of a case, all those kind of scoreboard type numbers should be driving the business of the practice and help you to understand and see the forest through the trees.
That's right.
Because a lot of times attorneys, there's two parts to running a firm. There's the business side and then there's the running the cases side.
Yeah.
And without having that big picture perspective of what's really driving the business, sometimes you can get caught up, especially in a contingency fee practice, with working the cases just for the sake of working the cases, but not having the overall business perspective that needs to come hand in hand with that so that you're making your time efficient and you're growing your business.
No, that's exactly right. And I think there's two things that people need to think about in that sense. One, you got to figure out your vision for your firm. Mm-hmm. Do you want to be, I'm a one attorney and I have one staff member and we handle X cases? There's nothing wrong with that. You got to decide what you want. It's your life. It's your business. And figure out what it is you want. If you want to run a larger firm and have 20, 30 attorneys working for you, and that's your goal, well, you can't get there unless you're analyzing all your data points all the way down the line. It's just never going to work unless you're doing that. I think that's number one. Number two, we kind of live in an outlier business, right? You can have your entire year's revenue, 80% of your revenue could come from one case.
Right.
Because you just had a huge year and a huge case. So you want to know that too when you make next year's financial decisions, right? If you did, $7 million in revenue, but 5 of it came from one case, you're probably not going to do $7 million in revenue next year. And you need to kind of know that ahead of time. And understanding that is important as well, is that, hey, which ones are the outliers? Which ones if we lost money on this case, is that an outlier or is that something consistent that we were doing incorrectly? If we got a big case, well, do we have any of those coming up where we can kind of project financially as well? How does it need to work out?
Right. Any advice for law firm owners out there that are looking for, a place to find out what resources are available? What kind of legal tech is out there? Would you recommend just going to different conferences and speaking to the vendors that are exhibiting, or is there websites that you recommend for folks to go to? How would you advise someone who wants to kind of get started down this path?
Yeah, great question. I think that great place to start is what you said. If you're going to conferences, take a lap around the exhibit room. I know we all feel like a piece of meat when we're walking out there and you've got these sales, you're like, hey, are you a lawyer? That's okay. Take the 20 seconds, 30 seconds to check out what these companies do. Ask them real quick, hey, in 10 words or less, tell me what you do. And you can just ask them. They'll just tell you real quick, 10 words or less, tell me what you do. And you can see, is it worth even engaging more in the conversation? Is it something your firm could use? And then use that time to schedule out appointments. If you're not, a conference goer and you're kind of just, hey, I do my own thing, I think a great website is Lawyerist. It's Lawyerist. I have no, benefit. I don't get any benefit from you going there, but Lawyerist is a good one. Bob Ambrogi, Ambrogi, is kind of like the godfather of legal tech. He's been talking and blogging about legal tech for 20 years now, 25 years. And there's a lot on there that may not apply to firms like us because there's some big law stuff and e-discovery and things like that. But there is going to be stuff there that does apply. Our good friend Bob Simon's always talking about legal tech. Right. I think there's, following him, he's got a lot to talk about on what's out there and what's useful. I think that there is, a ton of these places where these discussions are happening. But really, the key is being open to that discussion, calling your friends that run firms and saying, hey, I'm trying to get into more efficiency in my firm. What are you using that works for you?
Right.
And that's a great place to start.
Yeah, I think the mentorship thing is huge. You even look at successful business people in industries outside of the law, and they'll tell you that, there's just really no reason to reinvent the wheel. There's been a lot of firms that have come before that have implemented different things. And so reaching out to people and, grabbing coffee or grabbing a lunch and picking their brain, I think is also a great way for people to understand, what's out there and what works for other people. And then once you get on a particular platform, talking to the other firms that are using that specific platform is really, really helpful. They're going to be able to give you that insight of, they went through the onboarding process. They went through the, the pain of the first 3 months, 6 months on the platform, and maybe give you some advice to avoid some of the pitfalls that they went through or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, is that no matter what tech you decide to implement, whatever you think is a good piece of technology for your firm, be ready for a learning curve. Be ready for a speed bump part, which is, anytime you're trying to learn something new, right? You got to jump in and you got to try it. You can't learn how to swim from reading a how to swim book. Right. You got to jump in the pool. And you're going to struggle and you're going to flail and it's going to be hard and then you'll figure it out. And you got to be ready to commit to that learning process, that this is not going to be out of the box and I'm an expert at this thing.
Or that it fixes everything in your firm.
Right. That's exactly right. You got to be able to understand that this is, and ask these companies that question. Hey, how long is your typical onboarding process? What would you consider as a company, what would you consider a successful use case for a law firm? And what would success look like? Because if you guys aren't aligned on that, then that becomes a problem of, well, I thought it was going to do all these things. And then the salesperson's like, well, I never told you it was going to do all those things. Where did you get that idea from? So have that open conversation. And even if it's, to turn back to what you were talking about having those discussions with any potential mentors or anything, even if it's just as simple as DMing people on Instagram and saying, hey, any one quick question, you'll find, especially I found in this industry, everything I've learned in this industry, I've learned from people who have taught me and people that have been friendly to me and helpful to me, is just how helpful everybody is.
Yeah.
It's really amazing to see that. And I don't think a lot of industries have that. I think a lot of industries look at everybody as competition. Everybody as, I can't help their firm because if I help them, they're going to take a piece of my pie. And I've just found in the personal injury space that just isn't true.
Yeah.
People are so helpful.
There's a camaraderie there. There's a community. And I agree with you. And also, I've found that in adopting different technologies with my firm, I've always asked, the vendors or the companies that we onboard with, to provide me with a list of other firms that are using it. And then I just reach out and I say, hey, I'm thinking about, implementing this solution. They've told me that you're using it. Can we grab some coffee? You got time for a phone call? Because, as there's the sales pitch that goes on with any company,
that's right,
which sometimes is completely accurate, but it's still a sales pitch.
Yeah, for sure.
And then to be able to talk to a firm that's actually implementing it and using it is just going to give you a different perspective. And it's going to give you a perspective of, like, to your point, the use case and whether, you can foresee that fitting with your business and with your practice. How much would you say the early adopters and the, sort of long-term clients that Esquire Tek have helped to bridge that gap for some of your new customers?
Yeah, a ton. Bob was probably the first person I ever showed the program to outside of like our internal team, just to get his thoughts. And he's been a big proponent of it from the beginning. And that's been extremely helpful. So I'm very grateful to him. And, I'm glad that he trusted me enough that he's willing to put endorsements out and that we're going to deliver, because I don't want to make him look bad. And I feel that way when people go out there and endorse us and endorse me and endorse the product. I don't want to let them down. I don't want them to be like, well, I'm never going to trust anything he says again. We want to make sure it's working and we commit to that. So that it's been super helpful. And having either, a customer advisory board or a group of clients that know you and like you and are willing to be honest with people, because when you hire somebody, Brad, and people give you a list of references, like, when you call them, they're going to say that person was amazing, right? And that's probably true in this situation too, but you can ask them. I ask my clients all the time, if there was one thing you could change, what would you change? And I try to ask it in the negative, so it forces them to give me a negative response, as opposed to them just saying, oh, it's great, no, I love it. That's not helpful to me building a great product. What's helpful is tell me what you don't like.
Right. And
if I can fix it, I'll do my best. And if I can't, I got to tell you, unfortunately, that's just how it's got to be. And hopefully it's not a deal breaker for you.
Right. And I imagine if anybody has any questions about legal tech and they want to reach out to you, we'll put your handle in the caption here. Reach out to Pratik.
Yeah, happy
busy
to help.
guy, but he's always around to help anybody, whether it's Esquire Tek or just legal tech in general related. Great guy to know. Great guy to.
Thanks,
consult with, and he's not going to steer you in the wrong direction. All right, we are going to move into a segment now called Get the W or Take the L.
Okay, I've never seen this one before.
All right, well, that's what it is, man. I am going to relay a recent news story and then ask you a question as to whether the subject of the story gets the W or takes the L. All right, news story just came out this week. It's no joke. Humorous and quirky messages on electronic signs will soon disappear from highways and freeways across the country. The United States Federal Highway Administration has given states 2 years to implement all changes outlined in their manual released last month, including rules that spell out how signs and other traffic control devices are regulated. Administration officials said overhead electronic signs with obscure meanings, references to pop culture, or those intended to be funny will be banned in 2026 because they could be misunderstood or distracting to drivers. The agency, which is part of the United States Department of Transportation, says signs should be simple, direct, brief, legible, and clear, and only used for important information such as warning drivers of crashes ahead, adverse weather conditions, and traffic delays. Seatbelt reminders and warnings about the dangers of speeding or driving impaired are also allowed. So for banning references to pop culture or those intended to be funny from electronic highway signs, does the United States Department of Transportation Federal Highway Administration get the W or take the L?
They take the L. That's an L. I mean, look, I think that I get their point. They want to be very clear. They want to be professional about it. But I think it becomes more memorable when there's something humorous and there's a balance there. This reminds me very much, the age when we grew up, we used to call it the no fun league, right? Where they'd ban like touchdown celebrations and all this stuff. It's like, come on, everybody knows what's going on. And I think the signs that have a little flavor to them become a little more memorable, a little easier to remember and actually implement. So I think that's an L.
It's he's getting they're getting the L. The other thing is, as I was reading this article, I was thinking, are they just not like acknowledging that there's billboards and funny signage like all over the highway all the time?
Right.
And it's just for their signs. It can't be funny, but
well, and to your point, another thing is the virality of it, right? If somebody takes a photo of a humorous sign, we've all seen it been passed around the internet. So if they've got a message that is giving a great message, but in a humorous way, it may get passed around. And isn't the goal to just get the message out? U.S.
Department of Transportation, Mr. Shaw's giving you the L. Take the L.
If I get a speeding ticket on the way home, I know what happened.
You got a bullseye on your back now. Mm-hmm. All right. I want to see if we can finish the podcast with a few more big picture topics. Having been in the practice of law for over a decade, having been CEO of a legal technology platform, having interfaced with many, many different types of attorneys, what is your best advice for people coming out of law school, getting into the practice of law?
I think that the first thing they need to do is sit down and it sounds cheesy, but have a vision of what they want to accomplish. What is it that if they looked at themselves as a 20-year lawyer, what would they be proud of? Is it, hey, I just want to make as much money as I can, which is fine. Is it, I want to try a bunch of cases. I want to change laws. I want to do X, Y, Z. Whatever it is you as an individual want, that may change down the line. But for now, at least have a vision that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, here's what I want my career to look like. And then based on that, figure out the best way to execute that, right? If you want to be a trial lawyer, go work at a firm that tries cases, because being a solo practitioner, it's very hard to try cases when you run a firm. So you got a business to run. If you want to run your own business, then start your own firm and do all these things. But I think that for each individual, it's different. And they have to know what their vision is for their life and their career and then plan accordingly.
I always tell my folks, for any problem or anything that they're trying to solve within their workflow or even within their life in general, the same advice you just gave, which is start from the end game of what you want to accomplish and then work your way backwards. Reverse engineer it to set in motion the plan to get to where you're wanting to be at the end. So that's great advice.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And just to touch on that, it's Nick Saban has this great quote. He says, you have to have a vision, and then you have to create the process based on your vision. And then the third part is you have to have the discipline to execute that vision. And that's the hard part for a lot of folks, right?
And then the fourth part is if it doesn't work out, you just retire.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that works too. Maybe you can, Brad. We're all trying to get there.
Shout out to Coach Saban. It's been a good run. We'll see if he takes over the job as the Cowboys coach or something.
Crazy.
All right. And then lastly, a question I like to ask of many of our guests. What is the advice that you would give to your 18-year-old self?
Man, I would probably tell my 18-year-old self to just trust the process. Just keep working, probably the same thing I just said, which is, have a vision. I don't think at 18 or 19 or 20, I had any kind of vision for my life. I worked through college, and I worked for 4 or 5 years post-college before I decided to go to law school. And, I'm happy where I ended up, so I have no regrets. I like where I'm at. And if I had changed anything, I might have changed where I'm at. So I don't want to change anything. But I would say to just commit to the process of getting better every day. And at the end of the day, just ask yourself, what could I have done better? Whether that's as an employee or as a son or a husband or a daughter or whatever you are, I tell my, whatever you did today, just what could you have done better today? And then just do that tomorrow, and then keep following that process, and you'll achieve everything you want to achieve.
There you have it, folks. Some sage words of wisdom from Pratik Shah, CEO of Esquire Tek, Associate Director of Litigation at Panache, Boyle & Ravipudi. And it was an honor to have you as a special guest in studio today. We'll see you next time. This has been the Wallace Wins Podcast. Thank you so much. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Get your win at wallacewins.com.